Dishonesty of Nkandla, and the UN Security Council adopts a resolution to deploy international police in Burundi.
Here is a man representing a country is never the colonizer. He is doing to us what we expected those who colonized us yesterday to do.
It's about moving the African agenda forward together with the Chinese in a win-win situation.
I think this is now elevating the partnership that China has with Africa to another level.
We are saying to China, thank you very much for China's understanding of Africa's difficulties and challenges, as it has always done. We are thankful that the Chinese leadership and the people of China are prepared to be with us, to pull with us under these kind of circumstances.
The UN Security Council has approved a resolution paving the way for a UN police force to be deployed in Burundi. The resolution, drafted by France, calls on UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to draw up a list of options for the proposed presence within 15 days. Burundi has been embroiled in political violence since President Pierre Nkurunziza said last April he would seek a third term, which his opponents said was illegal. Since then, more than 400 people have been killed. There is concern the violence could grow into ethnic conflict in the region.
This resolution requests the Security General to propose to the Security Council options for a United Nations police presence in Burundi and within 15 days. The objective here is to back the African Union, which has deployed observers in Burundi. Finally, the fifth objective is to preserve and consolidate the Arusha Agreement and respecting both the letter and the spirit of this agreement. This peace agreement serves as a compass. The compass which is to guide all stockholders in Burundi as well as the international community.
South African President Jacob Zuma said on Friday that he unreservedly accepts a constitutional court ruling against him relating to upgrades at his private residence. Opposition lawmakers have heaped criticism on Zuma after South Africa's top court said he violated the constitution. In an address to the nation, Zuma said that he would comply with the court's demands and repay money spent on non-security related upgrades. The president added that he had acted in good faith and stated he had never knowingly nor deliberately set out to violate the constitution.
I welcome the judgment of the Constitutional Court unreservedly. The judgment has underscored the values that underpin our hard-won freedom and democracy, such as the rule of law and the accountability of public office bearers, while also respecting the rights of public office bearers facing scrutiny.
Meanwhile, South Africa's ruling African National Congress Party has downplayed opposition calls for President Zuma's impeachment, terming it an overreaction. The party has presented a united front in support of Zuma, with the Secretary General Gwede Mantashe saying that the president the president was only human and was bound to make mistakes. Mantashe's responses suggested that the party would continue backing Zuma and his removal was not on the cards.
Our view is that there's overreaction on the part of the opposition parties. There is also an element of sensationalization of the judgment. The call for impeachment is nothing new, nor is it genuine. It is an ongoing election platform ploy resuscitated every single year by the opposition in the form of either a vote of no confidence or now the impeachment call. So from where we're seated, we are not surprised by the opposition calling for impeachment. They've done that two months ago, where they called for a vote of no confidence, which collapsed.
Libya's UN-backed unity government has won the support of guards who secure the country's key oil terminals. An official from a unit of guards in charge of securing installations in Libya's so-called oil crescent in the east of the country said it had pledged loyalty to Sarraj's government. Libya's warring sides are under intense international pressure to cede power to Prime Minister-designate Fayez al-Sarraj, whose arrival in the capital on Wednesday angered a rival Tripoli-based government. There are signs that allegiances are starting to shift in favor of Sarraj. Liberia has confirmed a new case of Ebola. A woman who died in the capital Monrovia on Thursday tested positive for the virus. The World Health Organization declared the West African country free of Ebola back in January. CCTV's Katerina Vituzzi has more.
The 30-year-old woman died in hospital on Thursday, shortly after arriving at the medical facility, which is in central Monrovia. A post-mortem showed that she had Ebola. Efforts are now underway to try and trace all the people that she came into contact with while showing symptoms of the virus. The World Health Organization declared Liberia free of active Ebola transmission back in January, although health experts have warned that many flare-ups like this one are likely. Over the border in neighbouring Guinea, there have been several cases reported over the past few weeks, and there have now been troops sent from the Sierra Leone side of the border to the border with Guinea to ensure the surveillance of border crossing points there. Now, there have been 11,000 victims in this Ebola outbreak in West Africa since it began in December 2013. The worst is now over, and the majority of Ebola-specific treatment facilities in Liberia are now shut. Although the government has opened isolation facilities in most medical facilities and hospitals across the country, they still need a great deal of financial support. Katerina Vituzzi for CCTV in Accra, Ghana.
Uganda has drafted a law that sets out jail terms for parents who decline to immunize children below the age of 5 years. Many myths surround the immunization in Uganda, with some parents claiming it causes severe disabilities in children. Hilary Ayesiga reports.
A door-to-door polio vaccination campaign has started in Uganda. All children below the age of 5 are getting the dose, but some parents are not interested.
I do not want to immunize my child because I have heard of cases where children were immunized with an expired drug and it caused disability.
Health officials are trying to encourage as many parents as possible to embrace vaccination.
It turned out to be a hearsay. And so I explained to them that this immunization has been going on for so long, and within their community they could not point to any specific location or child who got a complication out of immunization.
Just a drop of this vaccine can be enough to save a child from death. But not everyone in this community is embracing this life-saving drug. And these negative perceptions and myths about vaccination are what these officials here are fighting. Members of Parliament are now pushing for a law to punish parents who refuse to immunize their children.
The gist of this law is to make it punishable for a parent or a caretaker or a guardian who willingly refuses to have the children under his or her care undergo this immunization.
Lawmakers believe if the bill is passed into law, it will help save many lives of children who die from preventable diseases. They are now urging neighboring countries like South Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo to strengthen their capacity to fight the spread of immunizable diseases. Hilary Ayesiga, CCTV, Kampala.
Africa is not one story.
Africa is not one story. Time. Time is money. Money invested here equals infrastructure development here. We analyze how decisions made in the boardroom can impact the life of the average worker in Durban or farmers' output in Kenya. From data from companies' annual reports, their financial results, to reports from the World Bank and the IMF, we will break down these reports with in-depth data analysis and guest interviews. From the nations that are making economic turnarounds to individual grassroots success stories, this is Global Business.
Agenda 2063 cannot move without the people.
Your stories.
Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News.
Trouble in Burundi is trouble in East Africa.
Your views.
One way to get us out of that poverty is give free education to all girls who cannot afford to pay.
Your voice.
We hope that we can get back on.
Africa Live. We've got you covered.
It's half past the hour. Let's bring you our top stories. The U.S. military says it has targeted a vehicle carrying 3 Al-Shabaab militants in a drone strike in Somalia. U.S. officials named the main target as Hassan Ali Dore, accused of organizing recent bomb attacks in which U.S. personnel were killed. The officials say 2 others were killed in the strike about 20 miles south of Jilib. Dore is believed to have helped facilitate a deadly Christmas Day 2014 attack at the airport and a March 2015 attack at the Makkah Al Mukarraman Hotel, both in Mogadishu. Kenya is marking 1 year since Al-Shabaab militants attacked Garissa University and killed more than 140 people. As Kenya remembers the dead, horrific scenes after the guns fell silent at the university still haunt many. A year on, authorities have prepared a series of commemorative events, including a marathon to mark the day and show the country's defiance against terrorism. And South African President Jacob Zuma said on Friday that he unreservedly accepts a constitutional court ruling against him relating to upgrades at his private residence. Opposition lawmakers have heaped criticism on Zuma after South Africa's top court said he violated the constitution. In an address to the nation, Zuma said that he would comply with the court's demands and repay money spent on non-security related upgrades. And that's a recap of the top stories. And here's a look at what's coming up in our business news segment. Zimbabwe kicks off process to compensate white landowners. Zimbabwean government officials have met with farmers, Western ambassadors and NGOs to discuss how to compensate evicted white landowners. Paying back the farmers is part of measures to try and end Zimbabwe's isolation by the West. Finance Minister Patrick Chinamasa said the government may issue treasury bills along with imposing a land levy to raise money to compensate the farmers. However, the process could take a long time as the evaluation of how much should be paid must be done first. President Robert Mugabe's land reforms have led to about 5,000 white farmers being evicted from their land by his supporters and war veterans over the past 16 years, more often than not in a violent fashion. For some, the process is fatal. Over a dozen farmers have been killed.
Just knowledge of that amount will help tremendously in deciding which way to go. Once we know the figure, and I think that we then enter into the next round of discussions, which is what are the modalities for payment? And on that, I'm committed. Government is committed.
Land is just taken away from you, and people move on a daily basis, and that you have got no recourse to the law, and that there's been no compensation coming forward. I think today is quite significant. It's for me a start of a process here. I hope to see outcome of this workshop.
I've got a problem with that. This is akin to government disempowering its own people. Because if you give back the land to the people, you don't tax the people in order to pay the thief who stole the land yesterday.
Clothing retailers in Zimbabwe are being pushed to the brink of bankruptcy by second-hand clothes, which have become popular with ordinary citizens. Two of the country's listed retailers recently presented depressed results, and they cited stiff competition from the informal market. Farai Mokutuya has the details.
I'm on First Street in the heart of Harare's central business district in what used to be the hub of clothing retail. These shops used to be the go-to outlets for the latest in high-end fashion. But they're under pressure and feeling the heat from second-hand imports.
Edgar's Limited reported a 24% drop in sales in 2015. Its revenue shrunk by 12% from $73 million to $63.9 million for the period to January 30th. Its high street competitor Truworths is also singing the blues, registering a marginal profit in the last year and projecting a difficult year ahead. Their collective woes are down to the proliferation of second-hand clothes, sent from abroad as donations, but smuggled into the country where they end up for sale on street pavements and out of car boots. The garments may be in vogue with cash-strapped locals now, but their impact could be a death knell for what's left of the clothing manufacturing industry.
It's taking away demand that we could be supplying and need to supply, and it's not because we're not competitive, it's because we're being asked to compete against something that isn't a real cost anyway. Because they're given away, it's almost impossible to compete with because it's being sold at any value because you never paid for it. So, they're usually sold at less than the cost of the fabric alone.
At its peak, the industry employed 35,000. A steady wave of factory closures in the last decade has whittled the workforce down to just 6,000. Manufacturers are hopeful that they can rekindle the glory days if the right policies are put in place. One of which is a ban on importation of second-hand clothes, announced last year but yet to be effected. Commitment to enforcing it remains to be seen.
The issue is whether the authorities can then control that. Will Zimbabwe Revenue Authority control it at the borders, or will we continue to have the leakages that have been happening for some time?
It looks like it may take more than just legislation to tame the locals' appetite for second-hand imports.
It's a question of what your money can buy you. We are talking of deteriorating disposable incomes. So if I can't afford what is being sold in Edgar's, if I can't afford what is being sold in Jet, obviously I'll go for cheaper offerings. As long as our economy is not performing, we'll continue to see customers trading down towards cheaper offering.
With economic growth sluggish at the moment, these street-side outfitters could be in business for some time to come. Farai Mokutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Yet again, the International Monetary Fund has cut its growth forecast for Nigeria as the oil exporter faces substantial challenges from low crude prices. In its annual review of Nigeria's economy, the fund said GDP growth would slow to 2.3% in 2016 from an estimated 2.7% last year. In February, after IMF officials visited the country, the fund had forecast growth at 3.2% for this year. In its latest statement, the IMF pointed out several key risks, including lower oil prices for a longer period of time, shortfalls in non-oil revenues, a further deterioration in finances of state and local governments, deepening disruptions in private sector activity due to constraints on access to foreign exchange, and resurgence in security concerns. The fund says Nigeria's general government deficit will grow further after doubling to 3.7% of GDP in 2015. Local and foreign national spaza shop owners in South Africa have signed a historic business agreement to ensure peace, security and stability in township businesses. Township enterprises have been badly affected whenever xenophobic attacks erupt in the country. Julie Shire has the details.
The signing of this memorandum of agreement is meant to put an end to the xenophobic violence that tore through South African townships last year and recently last month. It's an agreement that looks towards the future of uniting foreign and local spaza shop owners in an attempt to reduce friction between the two groups.
The importance of this event, even though it's coming yet again just after some of the challenges that happened last year in April recently happened. But these events that recently happened reminded us of the importance of speeding up some processes that will be able to assist us to bring peace, security and stability in the areas, particularly in informal business and tuck shops and all that is the people that are involved here.
Today is a day to say to this country that unity in diversity is possible through dialogue, through peaceful means, through holding hands. This agreement also indicates how tolerant South Africa is. This agreement is extremely exciting for all in question, and we hope that in future our migrant community also can come forward and play the significant role that is expected of them.
Foreign-owned businesses have cropped up across South African townships, and locals often accuse foreigners of putting them out of business with low prices. But this agreement aims to protect both local and migrant-owned spaza shops.
This is a historic agreement that we have been trying actually to bring together to understand our differences and our challenges and put our differences behind and reach an amicable solution, at least to end those attacks against non-nationals in this country. We are 100% confident that it is going to change a lot in the minds and in the hearts of different people who are doing actually these similar businesses in this particular sector.
Last April, mobs targeted foreign shopkeepers, looting and threatening them, forcing them to flee. Many feel this partnership will make a difference and protect them in the future.
It will help. It will definitely help. This agreement is a vital agreement between foreign nationals and South Africans as well.
After the violence from last year, we are trying to solve everything with the local people, and we already get solved, but we didn't get the agreement. Now we have the agreement. Now we will be more safer than ever.
This memorandum seals the importance between South Africans and foreign nationals working together towards a more peaceful relationship that will hopefully bring the end to xenophobic attacks in foreign national spaza shops. Julie Shire, CCTV in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And still in South Africa, Cape Town is laying claim to one of the coolest spots in the known universe. Not a nightclub this time, but a gadget known as the dilution fridge. CCTV's Travis Andrews has the story.
Like a scene from an old horror movie, but this is cutting-edge stuff. Believe it or not, this blue barrel contraption can plumb temperatures that defy description. More than 100 times chillier than the coldest place we know of in nature. The Boomerang Nebula, 5,000 light years away from Earth. The dilution fridge sets a new standard in chilled. But what's the point?
We're trying to improve and enhance our capabilities here, really for producing high-impact research, but also for offering training opportunities for students on the African continent. There's no reason why students here in South Africa, in Africa, need to travel to Europe or the US to carry out this kind of research.
In simple terms, research from the dilution fridge might help make computers work faster or give us a better insight into cryogenics, freezing our bodies till we're ready for resurrection. That may be some way off. For now, it's attracting scientific interest.
The ability to use this fridge and then to have access, near exclusive access to a fridge and get fridge time for a year or so with these devices because of the long setup time that's often required is a real benefit that we just wouldn't be able to get back in London or in Cambridge.
Because it's one of the first of its kind in Africa, there necessarily aren't many people working on this in Africa, and so when we spend the time and come and help set this up, it gives us preferential access to it afterwards, and hopefully we can measure for a long period.
The dilution fridge is still in its commissioning phase, but once fully operational will no doubt be a magnet in drawing in the brightest minds so that they can explore the realms of technologies that are yet to be discovered. Travis Andrews, CCTV, Cape Town.
Still coming up here on Africa Live. We tell you about a Nigerian radio station that has taken airwaves in London by storm.
My name is Michael Fikri. My dream is to live in a country that's prosperous, comfortable, where I can work at peace, live with a family comfortably, have education for my children. That's the future I see for myself, and I want to be able also to help my neighbors as much as possible, and that will be a total accomplishment for me. On a more wider scale, I want to live in an Africa that's internationally powerful, that has its place in an international arena that has become global and very close.
My name is Mahari Doihe, and my dream is to have a successful and bright life in the future. And my dream for our land, Africa, especially, is for the youth to have a bright future opportunity and to have a big chunk in the activity of the continent. I want the youth to have opportunities in terms of economy, in terms of creating his own dreams and making his own dream come true.
Results of cavity scans will return within 1 week to produce more details of what lies beyond Egypt's boy king Tutankhamun's tomb. In October, high-resolution scans suggested that the tomb of the king contained passages to 2 hidden chambers, including what one British archaeologist believes is the last resting place of Queen Nefertiti. If proven, the discovery would be the most significant this century and shed light on what remains a mysterious period of Egyptian history. British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves said that he believes Tutankhamun's mausoleum was originally occupied by Nefertiti, thought by experts to have been his stepmother, and that she has lain undisturbed behind what he believes is a partition wall of over 3,000 years.
We did the Japanese scan, which produced a very clear division, a very straight line between the left-hand side and the right-hand side of that wall. Something strange going on. But what's really odd about that, really suggestive, was that line coincided precisely with the plaster line that we saw in the surface of the scan of the north wall, which lines up precisely with the line in the ceiling and lines up precisely with the width of the antechamber, giving the suggestion that there is in fact a continuation of that tomb, of that corridor beyond the north wall.
A Nigerian music radio station has launched a sister station in the UK amid the rise in popularity of Afrobeats music abroad. Station owners of The Beats say they want to provide a platform for new African music for a growing audience in Britain. From London, Dan Whitehead reports.
You love this. Evening to Mr. Misha listening this way.
From Lagos to London, DJ Selector Maestro plays the latest music from across Africa.
This one here is by Ice Prince, it's called Boss.
From Nigeria's Wizkid to Ghana's Stonebwoy, there's a growing appetite in Britain for Afrobeat-inspired music.
It's different, it's, it carries a good vibe. It's and also it's time. It's time for African music to be put at the forefront.
The Beat London has just hit the airwaves and is the UK sister to the original Lagos station. There are plans to expand into North America too. Manager Chris Ubozi told CCTV that it's about making Africa's new music become mainstream in the West.
Nigerian, Ghanaian, Kenyan, South African music is just becoming global. I mean, it's just becoming... You still have the African beats in them, but the output is becoming global. Take the focus out of it being by African artists and just put it out there as global music, mainstream music.
The rise of Afrobeats music in the UK isn't just about the launch of this radio station, it's also being noticed on the high street. At Sister Ray Records in London, Afrobeat music sales are on the up. It's thought today's hip-hop music from Africa is benefiting from more traditional Afrobeat.
I think the Afrobeat tag really helps those artists, because I think Afrobeat was a very specific thing, a 70s music that mixed Yoruba rhythms with funk and jazz from the West, whereas now people use it more to just reflect danceable music from Africa, and people denote a certain kind of quality with the Afrobeat tag. So I think it really helps artists coming out now that it's become a more all-encompassing term.
Music sales, club nights and a new radio station. The popularity of Afrobeats looks set to continue in the UK. Dan Whitehead, CCTV, London.
And coming up in sports news. Crunch time in the Super Rugby League as Bulls face a redemption march against the Cheetahs. The South African Rugby Union has declined to announce the new coach of the country's 15-a-side rugby team, the Springboks. It is the third delay in naming a successor to Henneke Meyer, who opted not to seek an extension to his contract after a disastrous 2015 season. The Boks are looking for a new coach after Henneke Meyer decided not to seek an extension of his contract following the World Cup in England last year, where South Africa finished third after suffering a humiliating pool stage loss to Japan. Alistair Coetzee is the media favourite to become the 13th post-isolation coach of the Springboks. South Africa begins their international season with 3 home tests against Ireland in June. Meanwhile, the Bulls will clash with Cheetahs in the massive Super Rugby derby in the capital of South Africa. But the Bulls are no longer the team of yesteryear when they dominated the competition and now find themselves with an abundance of talent, a new coach and a big task to rebuild the famous rugby union, as Cés du Plessis now reports.
The Bulls are South Africa's most successful Super Rugby franchise. The men from the capital have won the coveted title 3 times and are now in a rebuilding phase as the union undergoes a change of playing style and direction. The famous rugby hub is now blooding young, talented players against the best the Southern Hemisphere has to offer, and after 4 games in charge of the Super Rugby team, Coach Nollis Murray knows there's still a long way to go.
We obviously want to win every week, but it's not always possible. But the one thing is we want to focus on certain areas, how to play better, a brand that all the people can come out and watch. But it's also important for us to not look only at this game, but for the future and make sure that the guys understand where our vision is. But we're far away from where we want to play. It's something we've played for 7 years in one way, a certain way, and now we have to bring the players through to a new kind of play, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Springbok hooker and Bulls captain Adrian Strauss is in his 2nd season of Super Rugby with the Pretoria-based team and feels there's an exciting energy around the talented youngsters and maintains that things are headed in the right direction for the team aiming to reclaim its status as a Super Rugby title contender.
Oh, it's very exciting for me playing with a bunch of youngsters. As you get older, the body definitely after a game gets a bit sore, and the energy is always there. They always make it exciting to come to training sessions, and it's great to see the youngsters coming through at the Bulls and also in South African rugby.
The weekend will see the Bulls, fresh from their first victory overseas for 3 years, take on the Cheetahs, and for Strauss, a former Cheetahs captain, there's respect for his old team, but his focus is now on his time with the Bulls and helping his new team win rugby matches.
It's not personal at all, it's all about, contributing towards the Bulls and our season, and our plans and vision for the year. So, it's just another game of the season, and, a very important one of that, playing at Loftus. We want to make this ground a special place to play at, and, it's going to be a good derby.
The Bulls will be in pink for a good cause this weekend when they take on their fierce rivals, the Cheetahs, in a crunch Super Rugby encounter. But it's not just about winning this match, it's about rebuilding this famous rugby franchise and getting it back to the heights it once held when it was crowned Super Rugby champions on 3 occasions. C.S. Duplessis, CCTV, Pretoria.
New FIFA President Gianni Infantino has vowed to establish a new image of FIFA as he continued his visit to South America, which included participating in a football match with Bolivian President Evo Morales in Cochabamba. A 60-minute match between friends of Gianni and the Bolivian presidential team was held in Cochabamba's Aurora Stadium on Thursday and attended by about 1,000 spectators. Infantino arrived in Bolivia on Wednesday to meet with heads of the Bolivian Football Federation and others, and also promised to establish a new image of FIFA and the crisis-riddled South American Football Association.
We are going to establish a new image of FIFA and of the national federations. We are going to invest at the FIFA level $1.4 billion in the next 4 years for the development of football worldwide.
Action at the English Premier League resumes this weekend after the international FIFA break. Aston Villa will host former champions Chelsea, while Norwich City will be at home against Rafael Benitez's Newcastle United. West Ham will entertain Crystal Palace as Bournemouth play Manchester City at home. The Black Cats will welcome West Brom as Arsenal seek to avoid another pitfall against Watford. Stoke City will be at home to Swansea, while Liverpool will welcome title-chasing Tottenham Hotspur at the Anfield.
We are depending on Leicester, and nobody knows at the moment how they will respond in the last 7 games. So if 7 games, you have 8. But what is important is that we play our 8 games with complete commitment and passion and see where we finish.
Saturday's El Clasico clash between arch-rivals Barcelona and Real Madrid at Camp Nou might not make much difference to the La Liga title race, but it provides a golden opportunity for one man in particular to significantly boost his reputation and credibility, Zinedine Zidane. The France legend put the Real Madrid squad through their paces in training on Friday. Although his team has recorded several high-scoring home wins and progressed to the Champions League quarter-finals, they have struggled away from home and lost to local rivals Atletico Madrid, surrendering any realistic chance of catching league leaders Barca and underlining the impression that Zidane has a big task on his hands.
This is a football match, and we have to think that this is a football match. We need to enjoy that, playing against good players, sizing each other up with Barcelona. But that's it. I'm going to sleep very well tonight because tomorrow I'm going to enjoy my first Barcelona versus Madrid as a coach. I want to enjoy it.
Contra el Barça.
Following their 1-2 finish at the opening round of the season in Australia, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton gave further credence to the assumption that it will be another year dominated by Mercedes as they lead the way in both of Friday's practice sessions for the Bahrain Grand Prix. The final timesheets, both sessions were topped by Rosberg, who followed the fastest lap in the first session, followed by Hamilton, and the two will be at each other's neck during Saturday's qualifying sessions. Romain Grosjean slipped from 9th to 14th place, while Sebastian Vettel finished in 6th place, one position behind his Ferrari teammate Kimi Raikkonen in 5th. Dutchman Max Verstappen claimed a morale-boosting 4th place, outperforming his Toro Rosso teammate Carlos Sainz Jr. Novak Djokovic, world number 1 Novak Djokovic moved a step closer to a record equaling 6th Miami Masters title after surviving a tough semi-final against 15th seed David Goffin on Friday. Djokovic was under pressure from the start as Goffin broke for a 4-3 lead, but Djokovic broke back immediately and upped the pressure to win the opening set by 7 points to 4 in the tiebreak. With Goffin visibly tiring as the match wore on, Djokovic took full advantage, breaking for a 4-3 lead and closed out the match comfortably to win 7-6, 7-4, 6-4 and book himself a place in Sunday's final, where he will play for a record 28th ATP World Tour Masters Trophy. Al-Farouq Aminu scored a career-high 28 points, helping the Portland Trail Blazers to a 116-109 victory over the Boston Celtics on Thursday night. Aminu was the Blazers' lifeline in the third, scoring 12 points and matching his career high of 20 points on a dunk, sparking Portland. Krebs' three-pointer and a rebound basket by Ed Davis capped the Blazers' 10-0 run, tying the game at 81 and bringing the crowd to its feet. Jay Crowder sank a big three-pointer with slightly over a minute left to give the Celtics a one-point lead. CJ McCollum answered with a tough fadeaway jumper to reclaim a one. That's it for this edition of Africa Live. Do send your feedback to africalive@cctv.com. Stay in touch with Africa Live on Twitter using the handle @CCTV News Africa. And you can also check us out on Facebook. Our page is CCTV Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thank you for your company.
Live from CCTV News headquarters in Beijing, this is Asia Today.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm Li Qiuyan in Beijing. It's 7 p.m. here in the Chinese capital and 7 a.m. in Washington, D.C., where we began. Coming up on Asia Today. The Nuclear Security Summit concludes in Washington, D.C., where Chinese President Xi Jinping urges all parties to enhance global nuclear security architecture. In Vietnam, Tran Tai Quan is sworn in as the new president for the next 5 years. Plus, the El Niño weather phenomenon continues to wreak havoc across Southeast Asia. A severe drought means Thailand is expected to export 20% less of sugar this year.
80% of the crop was damaged, and for the next year, I think it will be worse.
Our top story, the fourth Nuclear Security Summit has concluded in Washington, D.C. with the focus of locking down atomic materials to guard against nuclear terrorism. Now, in a joint communique by participating leaders, nuclear threat was called one of the greatest challenges to international security. Chinese President Xi Jinping said new threats and challenges keep emerging in the security field. He makes 5 pledges to make sure terrorists cannot get their hands on material to build the ultimate weapon. And that includes improved nuclear security capacity and promote less use of highly enriched uranium. Jessica Stone has this.
It wasn't all talk here at the 4th Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. More than 50 world leaders were on hand for a milestone, a legally binding agreement to help protect nuclear material from theft.
We expect that the treaty will enter into force in the coming weeks, giving us more tools that we need to work together in the event of theft of nuclear material or an attack on a nuclear facility.
The terrorist attacks in Brussels drove home the risks of such an attack. When Belgian police raided a suspect's apartment, they discovered a covert video of a Belgian nuclear official. A possible ISIL terrorist cell appears to have had him under surveillance. An international agreement to protect civilian nuclear materials from theft has been in effect since 1987, but it required an amendment to make it tougher. Chinese President Xi Jinping has been among those pressing to get enough signatures on the amendment to make that happen. Here are some of the main points of the amended Convention on Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials. The agreement requires countries to be responsible for the safe transport and storage of nuclear materials, report suspected nuclear smuggling, and, importantly, it would allow nations to update the agreement every 5 years. It took more than a decade to get to this final, tougher treaty, and now it'll go into effect in 30 days. Jessica Stone, CCTV, at the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials have welcomed the ongoing cooperation with China on nuclear security and non-proliferation. Take a listen.
We have greatly reduced the possibility that terrorists can get nuclear explosive material. But the threat is not yet down to zero, so we have to keep working on it.
We expect that the kinds of agreements we have with our Chinese friends, both at the government level but especially at the civilian level, can increase and improve both safety and security.
Both nations are committed to the goal of ensuring that highly enriched uranium and other nuclear materials are secure.
Now for more analysis, joining us in the studio is Ms. Su Xiaohui from the China Institute of International Studies. Thanks for joining us. I want to first play you a soundbite and get your reaction to this. So Democratic People's Republic of Korea's ambassador to the UN says his country will pursue its nuclear and missile programs in defiance of the United States and its allies. Have a listen to this.
If the United States continues, then we have to make the counter measures also, as I told you. So we have to develop and we have to make more the deterrence, nuclear deterrence.
So Ms. Su, that ambassador from DPRK to the UN says its country needs its nuclear program as a deterrence. Tell us more about that.
Well, I have to say that the context for the DPRK official making such remarks is that earlier this year, the country carried out the fourth nuclear test and aroused the international concern. And after that, the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution, including the sanctions against DPRK. So in this context, I believe DPRK is trying to send out the signal to the outside world that the country still believes that military capacities, especially nuclear and missile capacities, are of key importance to this country. This country is deeply concerned about its security. In all these years, we have witnessed that this country invested a lot of resources and money in developing its nuclear capacity. And actually, it has made some progress. But my understanding is that it is not the right way to resolve the problem. Even though the country made some progress in its nuclear capacity, it is not enough to defend the country. But on the contrary, it makes the security environment of the country worse. So it is not the right track to resolve the problem and to try to reduce the tension in the region. So in the context of the nuclear summits, all the related countries, the countries attending in the summit believe that denuclearization is still the final goal of the Korean Peninsula. So denuclearization is the goal that all the related countries are working on and try to ask the DPRK to obey the rules and the regulations set about by the United Nations.
And other than the DPRK issue, a focal point of this year's summit is, of course, nuclear terrorism. And there's growing fear that terrorists may get their hands on, weapon-grade nuclear materials and make a dirty bomb. How do we mitigate these kind of threats?
Well, I have to say that terrorism is still a big problem. And in recent years, even though a lot of countries, including the United States, some big countries, tried very hard to counter terrorism, we still witness the development in terrorist groups, especially in the Middle East. So what I believe that all the countries in the world, including some big countries, are worrying about is that the terrorist group have some devices related to nuclear capacity and will make more damages to harm people's lives. So what they are trying to do is to control the risk. So with the increasing risk of the terrorist attacks, especially with nuclear devices, the related countries should work together to talk about how to prevent the terrorists from acquiring such capacities and devices. So that is a hot topic in the Nuclear Security Summit. And actually, I believe that no country in the world can resolve the problem alone. So they should work together to talk about it. And China has talked about several levels cooperation. The first is that governments should talk to each other and work with each other. And second is that the research units, academic people, they should talk about some practical measures to carry it out. And the last thing is that the public, the civilians, should know how to prevent things from going further and how to protect themselves.
And effective mechanisms really needed in place. Thank you, Ms. Su, for your analysis. That's our today's top story. Now let's take a look at some other headlines from around the world. Authorities of Brussels' main airport say it is technically ready to reopen on Sunday, 10 days after it was attacked by suicide bombers. Only the government's go signal is needed for the airport to resume operations. On Friday, police and the government agreed with the deal in tightening security at the airport. When it reopens, it will only work at a 20% capacity, handling only 800 to 1,000 passengers departing per hour. Greek lawmakers have amended a law needed to implement a deal to deport migrants and refugees to Turkey as soon as Monday. Greece says this EU-Turkey deal will ensure that asylum seekers are protected under international law. But the European Commission says Greece's move is not essential as long as safeguards are in place to allow migrants to be sent to a safe third country or a safe first country of asylum. Amid protests calling for her ouster, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff insists the impeachment is not legal.
We need to stay alert and to resist the anti-democratic tendencies, to resist the provocations. We don't defend the violence, they do. They apply the violence, we don't.
Rousseff is facing impeachment over alleged fiscal mismanagement. With a lower house vote expected in mid-April, she and her allies are looking to secure the support of smaller parties. She needs 172 out of 513 votes to stop the impeachment proceedings. We have much more coming ahead. Up next.
80% of the crop was damaged, and for the next year, I think it will be worse.
Thai sugarcane farmers are taking a hit from one of the country's worst droughts, affecting the output forecast of the world's second largest sugar exporter this year.
The Taliban later set light to the entire shed, and that's why some of the footage you see here has fire damage.
Plus, our correspondent raises the curtain on how Afghanistan's film and TV industry has evolved throughout decades of war.
A land that is growing at a rapid pace.
It's a smash and grab business model where you come in and you transform urban space.
Full of natural resources.
Miners still tap into veins of tin, zinc and silver.
And many races. With the largest rainforest on the planet, it is in constant change, fighting to succeed.
Is hosting mega events like the World Cup and the Olympics worth the financial and human costs of having to displace so many families?
Hear their voices. Walk with us through the Americas. Americas Now.
Welcome back. Well, China has assumed the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council for April. Liu Jieyi, China's permanent representative to the UN, held a briefing on the Council's planned work for this month at the UN headquarters in New York City. Well, he said 3 public debates would be held on the Palestine and Israel issue. Well, China's proposal of holding an anti-terrorism public meeting and an anti-piracy meeting proposed by China, Angola, and Senegal. Now, the Council presidency rotates among its 15 member states based on the English language alphabetical order of the country's name on a monthly basis.
Where it stands, how close it is.
Meantime, the National Assembly of Vietnam has elected Tran Thai Quan as the country's president. Now, Kwon was sworn in as the new president after receiving 452 yes votes out of the 481 valid ballots at the ongoing 11th session of the 13th National Assembly. Prior to the election, Kwon had served as Vietnamese Minister of Public Security from 2011, while he was the only candidate put forward by the Communist Party's 5-yearly Congress in January. Now, the outgoing National Assembly is overseeing the transition to a new government 3 months earlier than scheduled. Elsewhere, Seoul says the DPRK is using radio waves to jam GPS signals in South Korea, affecting the navigation of scores of planes and vessels. Well, South Korea's defense ministry said its northern neighbor has been sending GPS jamming signals since Thursday from various locations near the border. CCTV's Eugene John reports from Seoul.
Right. The South Korean government says more than 100 ships and planes have been affected by the DPRK's GPS signal disruption as of Friday. Now, the DPRK has been doing this against South Korea for about a month now, according to the defense ministry here, but the signal was put on full power on Thursday. It hasn't led to any significant damage to the military or even civilians so far, but South Korea did issue a GPS disruption warning in Seoul and areas close to the inter-Korea border, and also warned Pyongyang to immediately stop what South Korea calls a clear provocation that violates the inter-Korea armistice agreement and the regulations of the International Telecommunication Union.
Well, Turkish police have detained a man suspected of killing a Russian pilot whose plane was shot down last November by the Turkish Air Force near the Syrian border. Alparslan Çelik was caught in the Aegean coastal city of Izmir on Thursday, along with 13 other people. Well, Russia had demanded Çelik's arrest as he had publicly admitted to being among a group of fighters who shot the pilot as he parachuted out of his plane. But Çelik's lawyer claimed that the group because the reports that they were carrying weapons. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has dismissed media reports alleging that Russia and the United States have reached an agreement over the fate of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Well, the news comes as work continues to resume UN-led peace talks in Geneva.
That's why all these leaks about allegedly reached agreements in Moscow with John Kerry about Assad's fate. They are probably just reason to create some kind of background in international social opinion and mess up the issue, to try again to achieve some kind of compromise which breaks previous agreements.
Still in Syria, the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the country's most important archaeological locations. A lot of its ancient treasures were destroyed by the Islamic State group after it captured the city last May. Jung Yibing has this report.
During the 10-month control under ISIL, many of the ancient city's relics were destroyed. The Temple of Baal once formed a center of religious life in ancient Palmyra and was the best preserved relic in the city. Now it is gone, brought down by the ISIL explosives in last August. Only the arched main entrance into the temple survived the bombings. Another landmark, the Arch of Triumph, was also destroyed to ruins. The 1,800-year-old monumental arch framed the approach to the Roman city. Although the Syrian government has said it will repair the destroyed relics, it is definitely not an easy task. Less than a mile away, the modern-day district has been completely deserted. Traces of fighting could be seen everywhere. After retaking Palmyra last month, the Syrian army has been working on dismantling explosives.
As you can see, they planted 2 to 3 mines together every 100 meters. The mines were laid to impede the advance of the government forces.
Officers said they have so far detonated 500 mines, and it is unknown how many are still left undiscovered. Zheng Yibing, CCTV.
Drought is lingering in Southeast Asia. Now, farmers are struggling in Thailand as reduced water for irrigation has hurt agriculture, particularly rice cultivation. With less rain expected this year because of El Nino, the government has implemented drought mitigation measures. They call on farmers to stop irrigating paddy fields to save underground water and encourage them to grow other plants such as potatoes, mushrooms, and corns, which use less water. And it's not only a local problem, while the drought is expected to impact the exports of sugar from Thailand this year.
With this kind of weather of 40 degrees and no rain, the sugarcane cannot survive. 80% of the crop was damaged, and for the next year, I think it will be worse.
The sugar supply is not enough for export. We have a huge quota for export, but we do not have enough supply to meet the target. We're still missing about 300,000 tons of sugarcane to produce sugar.
Now, Thailand is forecast to ship 20% less the sweetener to international markets in 2016. And the drop in the world's second largest sugar exporter will add to a global supply deficit this year. Thailand is also a major exporter of rice and natural rubber. And as its economy largely relies on farming products, last month, half of the country did not receive a single drop of rain. The drought is expected to be relieved only when the rain season comes in June. Now, for more on the drought, let's turn to our correspondent, Martin Loh. He's joining us live from Bangkok. Good to have you with us. Martin, now Thailand has been called the rice bowl of Southeast Asia. How bad is the situation there?
It is bad. Unfortunately, this seems to be a never-ending cycle. We have floods in the winter and drought in the summer, but this year it is particularly bad, possibly the worst for 2 decades. Now, the reason is there simply isn't enough water storage capacity. This country, along with many others, needs to build more reservoirs. That winter rain is seeping away. Now, Thailand's already taken the controversial step of diverting water from the Mekong River for crop irrigation. This has caused complaints from neighboring countries who also rely on the Mekong, particularly Vietnam, which is downstream and also has its own problems with drought. Now, China is helping this situation. It's been opening dams on the upper Mekong to allow more water to flow down into the affected countries, but it's only a short-term solution. Now, as you've said, rice production is suffering terribly. Farmers are scratching their heads watching their crops die. Now, this is after the government has asked a number of rice farmers to move away from rice, to limit production of the rice, or to move away to other crops which consume less water. Now, ironically, some of those who did that moved from rice to sugar, and as we've heard, sugar production is also suffering hugely in some of the sugar-producing areas. It hasn't rained for 6 months. Now, that's meant that not just this year's crop, but the young shoots which were being prepared for harvest next year are also dying. So this is a problem that isn't going away in the near future. Agriculture is suffering the most. Even the big cities, though, are facing concerns that taps could run dry in the provinces and possibly even here in the capital, Bangkok.
Such a worrying situation. And the Thai New Year, which involves the famous water festival, is coming in 10 days. Is that still going ahead?
Yeah, Thai New Year is in 10 days' time, also called Songkran. This is a water festival. The whole country basically comes to a stop for 5 days, and people have water parties in the streets, water fights, not just water pistols, but huge barrels of water and buckets of water thrown at each other. Now, the government has said because of the drought this year, they're asking people not to celebrate Songkran with water. But that's a bit like asking the sun not to rise in the morning. For Thais, this is the most important part of the year. It's like Christmas, New Year, and all their birthdays rolled into one. So there's no doubt they will go ahead, they will celebrate with water this year. When it's all over, maybe they'll look for the consequences. The government is trying to ask people to limit consumption domestically, industrially and agriculturally. And also this country has a fleet of rain-making aeroplanes. Those are aeroplanes that fly up in the sky and spray a mix of chemicals onto the clouds to try to encourage water production and rain to fall. Unfortunately, this year the skies are blue and there aren't enough clouds in the sky to make this effective.
Wow, Martin Loh joining us live from Bangkok. Thanks so much for bringing us that update. And it's not just Thailand that's been hurt by the drought. Tens of millions of people in the Southeast Asian region are being affected by the low level of the Mekong River, which flows through Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The drop in the water level has plunged the region into the worst drought in more than 20 years. And weather reports forecast continuing high temperatures that provide no hope for any relief for the region in near future. And that's today's Asia Focus. For more business news across Asia now, joining us in the studios with my colleague, Xing Jimmy. Jimmy.
Thanks, Julian. And we are talking about the Ministry of Commerce says that it will levy anti-dumping duties on important acrylic fibers from Japan, South Korea, and Turkey effective Saturday. Importers of acrylic fibers from the three countries will be required to pay deposits ranging from 6.1% to 17.8%. The ministry also decided to levy anti-dumping duties on imports of grain-oriented flat-rolled electrical steel from Japan, South Korea, and the European Union. The importers will be subject to deposits ranging from 14.5% to 46.3%. Taiwan's Honghai Precision Industry Company, also known as Foxconn, the world's biggest contract electronics maker, has finally signed an acquisition deal with Japanese electronics company Sharp. Foxconn offered $3.5 billion to purchase a 66% controlling stake and over 10 million special shares in Sharp. Foxconn will also take over Sharp's advanced screen technology, which will strengthen its pricing power with major client Apple. Turning to Hong Kong, where retail sales of one of Asia's top shopping hubs saw the greatest drop in 12 months in February. That was due to a sluggish performance in the tourism sector. Retail sales in February plunged 20% year-on-year to 37 billion Hong Kong dollars, or $4.8 billion. The drop was caused by a dwindling number of visitors to the special administrative region. Authorities say the retail sales do not look promising in the near term. And that's today's Asia Business. Back to you, Qiu-Yuan.
Thanks, Zhou Ming. Up next is Trending Asia. Afghanistan's film industry has been struggling to get back on its feet following decades of war, and conservative traditions have limited the industry's development. Some have risked their lives to save the cultural heritage, while others are challenging the outdated social norms. Our correspondent Nighly raises the curtain on how Afghanistan's film and TV industry has evolved throughout decades of war.
These images have never been seen by outside eyes. They reveal an Afghanistan long forgotten. Ahmed Shah Siddiqui and Mohammad Qasim Khatami were two of 11 men from the Afghan Film Commission that hid the negatives of some of Afghanistan's most revered films from the Taliban, a conservative and ruthless regime that ruled the country between 1996 and 2001. The Taliban banned all films and pictures, saying they were against God.
When the Taliban decided to burn these films, from the first day they started to burn them here in this field.
The Taliban would first take the film out of the canister, put them in the trucks, and leave the canisters in one corner of the shed. On some days, when we had a chance, we hid some of the films under the pile of empty canisters.
Had the Taliban found out about it, the men say they most certainly would have been killed. The Taliban no longer rule Afghanistan, but its conservative ideology still does, putting pressure on Afghan filmmakers, particularly those in front of the camera. Afghan actress Akila Rezai Kamel's family has received threats because of her job.
Although my family is literate and familiar with open cultures, the social pressures force them to stand against me. My family thinks that choosing a career in the cinema is a disgrace.
Regardless of her awards and international accolades, Akila is estranged from her family. The conservative ideology that feeds public dislike of cinema has affected the industry. Afghan films have been filling theater seats abroad, exposing the world to its repressive past and then pushing back against it. 10 Afghan films produced with the support of foreign companies have been nominated for the Oscars for language category since 2002. Just like their brave predecessors, new generation Afghan filmmakers are taking it upon themselves to keep the momentum of change going through film and television, no matter what the cost. I'm Nighly in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Well, for more insights on Afghan's cultural industry, you can watch the full story on Assignment Asia, which airs tonight at 9:30 p.m. Beijing time and will be replayed the following Monday at 9:30 a.m. Well, today is World Autism Awareness Day. Symptoms of lack of empathy and problems with nonverbal communications. In China, there are 600,000 preschool children with autism. There are various ways of helping them.
It is said dolphins can help autistic kids. I bring my son here to interact with the dolphins. He seems to like spending time with them.
And that does it for this edition of Asia Today. If you'd like to find out more about our program, follow CCTV News on your favorite social media. You can also email us at asiatoday@cctvnews.cn. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Hello, welcome to Dialogue. I'm Pando. 7 years after the then newly inaugurated U.S. President Barack Obama raised a vision of a world without nuclear weapons in a high-profile speech in Prague, the last nuclear security summit mechanism he initiated